going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock, I'm Patrick Christie's and this is GB News Tonight. Now, the Bibby Stockholm barge is back open for business, but look who's come barging in. Yeah, the eco-louts at Just Stop Oil attempting to block a bus transporting the migrants. So, have the so-called climate activists been exposed as hard-left agitators? Not they need much exposing, surely, but I'd go head-to-head with Just Stop Oil's spokesperson Emma Brown in an unmissable clash. That's happening shortly. Plus, why have 2,000 of the UK's best-known lovies, including Tilda Swinton? No, me neither. Steve Coogan, yeah, heard of him. Charles Dance? Yeah, OK, bit of Cockney rhyming slang there. Signed a letter condemning Israeli military actions, but not the sadistic terror of Hamas. I will deliver my scathing perspective on these out-of-touch liberal elites next. Then, my leading pundits share their views. And tonight, who've we got? Well, it's the wonderful Alison Pearson, Lord Bailey and Amy Nicole Turner. What a top-tier panel. And as anti-Semitic chants are heard at a pro-Palestine protest outside Downing Street, do police need to be tougher on these kind of demonstrations? I disagree with Anne Widdecombe on this, apparently, although I find that hard to believe. I don't think I've ever disagreed with Anne Widdecombe on anything, but she will give her views very, very shortly. I'll also be joined live in the studio by former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena, with it now just, how long? An hour until the polls slam shut in this pivotal pair of by-elections. We will be breaking the exit polls for you live on this show. Could be really important results, that. But finally, has King Charles royally intervened to stop the national scourge of cancel culture?
Especially in the digital sphere, where civilised debate too often gives way to rancour and acrimony.
Well, my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, they're going to react to the monarch's latest sensational speech, as well as reports that Prince Harry's UK house hunting has annoyed Meghan. Oh, it's a shame, isn't it? As always, you will get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. A blockbuster 2 hours, I think we can all agree, is coming right up. Right after the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Hello there, very good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has held talks with the Saudi Crown Prince in Riyadh, his latest in a series of diplomatic meetings in the Middle East. Rishi Sunak encouraged Mohammed bin Salman to use his influence to support stability in the region. The pair agreed about the importance of avoiding a further escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Prime Minister will make further stops in the region, which are yet to be announced. Well, earlier the Prime Minister told his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, he welcomed the decision to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza from Egypt and said the UK stood in solidarity with Israel. And Mr Netanyahu thanked him for visiting, calling it a strong statement of support in a time of darkness. Rishi Sunak, though, stressed Israel must adhere to international law in Gaza and the conflict must not spread elsewhere.
I've had good, productive conversations with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli President Herzog. Among other things, we discussed the importance of this conflict not escalating regionally and the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza to help people who need it. I also had the opportunity to meet families of British nationals who have been taken hostage. We're doing absolutely everything we can to get them home.
9 Britons are now known to have died in the Hamas attacks that took place earlier this month, with 7 still missing. Israel continues to strike what it calls Hamas targets in Gaza. Some viewers may find the following images distressing. Palestinian authorities say more than 3,700 people have died in Gaza and some 12,000 are injured. The UN says 100 lorries of aid are needed per day to address the humanitarian crisis. It's unclear, though, when the hundreds of lorries that are waiting to get into Gaza will be allowed across the border from Egypt. Meanwhile, Israel's defence minister has told troops they'll soon see Gaza from the inside ahead of an expected ground offensive. Asylum seekers have returned to the Bibi Stock home in Portland, despite activists attempting to prevent it from happening. Just Stop Oil protesters obstructed a coach carrying migrants, holding banners reading "No prison ships" and "Demand humanity." All 39 people were removed from the barge in August after Legionella bacteria was discovered. And a 57-year-old woman has died after being swept into a river in Angus in Scotland, where Storm Babette has been battering the country. The red weather warning means there is a risk to life with extensive flooding and winds stronger than 70 miles an hour forecast. And more than 400 homes have been asked to evacuate in Brechin. Thousands more have been left without power, and they are facing unprecedented amounts of rain. TV online and DAB radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
A group of washed-up has-beens, total nobodies and Steve Coogan have waded into the Israel-Hamas war and somehow managed not to condemn the Islamist terrorists. The Artists for Palestine UK body, which sounds like the kind of thing dreamed up by a load of trust fund Oxbridge lovies over a spliff during a warehouse exhibition of bang-average modern art, is a group of around 2,000 people who aren't even household names in their own homes. They say Gaza is already a society of refugees, and the children of refugees, now in their hundreds of thousands, bombarded from air, sea and land. Palestinians whose grandparents were forced out of their homes at the barrel of a gun are again being told to flee or face collective punishment on an unimaginable scale. They conveniently ignore the fact that their political party that a load of Palestinians voted for rampaged across the Israeli countryside, recently beheading babies. Now, it seems like an odd hill to die on this, arguably aligning with terrorists. They want to boycott Israel completely, this lot. And they are obviously concerned about the idea that this makes them look like anti-Semites, because on the group's website, it includes some handy answers when people ask them questions about their slightly bizarre desire to hammer the Israelis. Questions like, what about the Holocaust? Now, I think when you have to find a way to fend off questions about the Holocaust, you're probably on the wrong side. Although some of the people endorsed by the group Artists for Palestine include Emma Watson, who has, a bit of a checkered track record when it comes to campaigning, doesn't she? I imagine that it might only just be a matter of time before she's at Benjamin Netanyahu's penthouse in Tel Aviv and swimming in the pool and possibly even attending a synagogue. But some of the great victories hailed by this group of uppity little champagne socialists include author Sally Rooney refusing to publish her books in Israel. Oh, wow, I'm sure the Israeli Defence Force is quaking in its boots because Jerusalem's Waterstones can't get hold of a copy of Conversation with Friends. Now, it's the entitlement of these people, isn't it, that really gets me. Why do they think that anybody should take a blind bit of notice about what any of them have to say? Half of this lot will be wadded, born into money, or will have done some incredibly fruity things in the 90s, and now they just put their names to stuff like this to make them feel better about their own personal shortcomings. The fact is that half of them would have been torn limb from limb by Hamas if they lived in that part of the world. And that's not Israel's fault. None of the gay signatories would be alive. It's all very well and good saying things like LGBTQ+ for Palestine, but unfortunately for them, Palestine is not for LGBTQ+. None of the women would have done well for themselves, and that's not Israel's fault. This kind of letter is just symptomatic of a load of lovey wet wipes who can afford to have designer views because they've got designer lives. Now, that is, of course, my view. Now, time for the thoughts of the panel. With Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, we've got Conservative peer Lord Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Alison, what do you make of people like Steve Coogan coming out and not condemning an Islamist terror group?
I think they're so stupid, Patrick. They're confusing Hamas with hummus, the chickpea dip. Yeah, as you said in your introduction, it's beyond bizarre. They're calling for they're saying our government is not only tolerating war crimes but aiding and abetting them. Hamas, who lead Palestine, only back on the 7th of October, committed some of the most outrageous atrocities since the Holocaust. And I just think they're incredibly naive. There's nothing wrong with thinking that Palestinian citizens should be treated well, but the problem is it's governed by these absolute monster terrorists,
yeah,
and who steal some of that aid that's lining up to come in. That's not going to be going to the ordinary person in the street. That's going to be going straight into Hamas headquarters. But can I just say, so all the things that those 2,000 signatories hate the most in life, racism, sexism, homophobia, misogyny, welcome to the world of Hamas. And I'd quite like to send the 2,000 of them to Gaza and put them in the rooms where they're keeping the 200 Israeli hostages, including tiny children. And then they can see how well they get along with those peaceable people.
But also, as well, I mean, there wasn't exactly mass outrage from what we could see on the streets of Gaza when these hostages were being paraded through it. I mean, dare I say, the general consensus of the people who, lest we forget, voted for Hamas. These people voted for Hamas, and now you've got, the likes of Emma Thompson or whoever it is coming out and saying, oh, look, come on, these people are hard done by.
I mean, it shows a staggering level of a lack of knowledge, quite frankly. What Hamas did is you cannot justify it. It's indefensible. It doesn't matter how much you want to support the people of Palestine. Everybody wants a two-state solution. Everybody knows the people in Palestine should be able to live their lives to the fullest. But coming out and murdering up to 1,300 people in a surprise terrorist attack, supporting that does nothing. And here's the important piece. They've all signed this letter that has absolutely no balance. And if we want to return to any sort of peace negotiation, if we want to resolve this in perpetuity, it will need balance. And the likes of these people supporting it outrageously, trying to influence young people with no balance, means that the situation goes on. And what they're doing is keeping Palestinian people in pressure, not helping them.
Do you think this
survive.
actually shows, Amy, that there is a undercurrent of anti-Semitism that courses through lovey society?
I think this is something that we really need to make clear, that being pro-Palestine, talking about freeing Palestine, talking about the occupation, the apartheid that's going on in Palestine and has been for the last 50 years of occupation, does not make you anti-Semitic. Being critical of the Israeli Defence Force does not make you anti-Semitic. There were hundreds of Jews on the pro-Palestine march last Saturday. They're not linked. Half of the signatories on this list are Jewish.
Yeah,
Mariam Margulies was on these lists.
But that's the point, isn't it?
She's a raging lefty, isn't she?
Yeah, but that's the point.
But she's also a Jewish woman.
Hold on, but that's the point, because what they've done, they haven't said we're pro-Palestinian. What they've done is supported Hamas. What they've done, yes, they have.
Unbelievably ridiculous.
By having no balance in that, you immediately say...
Amy, they didn't mention
them once.
anything about the atrocity.
No, they didn't, because we don't have to prefix absolutely everything.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
October 7th, because it goes without saying that has been widely condemned. Yes,
No, it doesn't. It has to be
Everyone has been
condemned by
absolutely outraged.
them.
And the difference is that our government isn't funding and supporting Hamas. It is funding and supporting in aid. Very different. Also, how could you look at 6,000 bombs be dropped this week on a population the size of East London, including white phosphorus, on civilians?
What about the 2,000 rockets before that? The point is this. Hamas attacked innocent people. So that doesn't make... Two wrongs do not make a right. The fact that Hamas attacked innocent people and these people have not mentioned that means that they are supporting...
OK, let's go back to the actual lovely celebrities here that are doing this, right? Because you end up with the likes of Gary Lineker ominously...
You hated it when he didn't say anything, and now you hate it when this lot say something, so how can we win?
I'm sorry, no, because the way to win would just be to go, I condemn the acts of outrageous terror that beheaded a load of babies.
These are
and to not
UK
mention
citizens.
that, I find that utterly bizarre.
Look, the Muslim Council of Britain found it possible to do that. People who are members of that council, who clearly support the Palestinian people, they could do it, so why could...
But is this not simple?
This lot are calling, Amy, for a ceasefire. Hamas are holding 200 hostages, including elderly ladies who were peaceniks who were trying to work.
We haven't seen the IDF have any care for those hostages when they're wiping out.
You cannot do what they're asking because Hamas don't want the Jews to exist. If I said to Patrick, I'll make a deal with you and Patrick Christie's will no longer exist, that's the price of the deal, you wouldn't take it, would you?
No, everyone else would want me to, but I wouldn't take it. But can I just ask, just about the actual celebrities themselves, do you think they really back this, or do you think that they live in this kind of weird little elitist bubble where they sit around kind of fire pits in Hampstead, sipping expensive wine and stroking
I wonder.
I can't believe you're saying that.
I wonder how many people's publicists signed this on their behalf.
How could you not be moved by the videos coming out of Gaza from this week? Social media has meant that we've all had to see exactly for probably the first time.
Not true. I've been to Palestine.
Well, I've watched this week children being flattened under rubble. And how can you not be moved by that? How can you not want to look into that?
I was incredibly moved by the idea that Hamas fired a rocket from a cemetery behind a hospital and that rocket ended up hitting that hospital.
But now all the people in Gaza deserve what they're...
No, not at all. Not at all.
But it's what Patrick's saying. There's a certain little set of views and values that are acceptable. I've been talking to people today in entertainment, trying to get them to be supporting the Jews in Britain. And it's amazing. They'll say, oh, yes, we feel very sympathetic. But you cannot put your head above the parapet if you're in a certain arena.
Which is bonkers, isn't it?
It is. And I think, where is the moral conscience?
This is it.
There's no moral conscience.
This sums it up. Why is it OK, Amy, do you think, for people to come out and not condemn the atrocities of an Islamist terror group, right, and not actually condemn it? If that was the other way round, they'd never work again, that lot.
The reason that people, I think, didn't jump, because it's a very, very complicated story with 70 years of history behind it.
Not according to this letter, it isn't. It's very simple, the letter.
What's going on now?
It literally does not mention the fact that up to 1,300 people were murdered in a surprise attack.
But you don't...
That's very simple. They could have just mentioned that. It's as simple as that.
Well, what came before that? What came before that? There's a lot of context, there's a lot of complexity to this whole situation.
And they never mentioned any of it. They never mention it. That's the problem, Amy. For them to support the people of Palestine is excellent. Good for them. For them to ignore there's an other side to the story, that's where the problem lies.
Ridiculous things. If you go on their website, right, they're petitioning the Black Eyed Peas to not perform in Israel this November.
Yeah.
They're hammering a group called Imagine Dragons to not perform in Israel. They're going at the Barbican Theatre in London because apparently they've got some link to the Israeli embassy and stuff.
It's about eradicating
they just hate Israel.
It's about eradicating the Jews.
I think they hate the way Israel is treating Palestine and has done for the last 50 years. They don't have equal rights. They can't come. They can't go. They can't work, they can't live.
These people don't understand. People always say, if Hamas laid down their arms, there'd be peace. If Israel lays down its arms, there'd be no Israel. That's it. They are under existential threat.
What
That's
do these
why
people do? It's like the Emma Thompsons of this world, isn't it? They decide that they're going to campaign about the environment and they get on a private jet or they get on business class or they get on a super yacht. They don't actually do anything. They just think, I'm going to virtue signal, and that is...
That's the problem.
This has got people understanding what is going on in Palestine.
That's exactly what it isn't doing, because it isn't giving any balance.
All right.
If it had balance, it would have merit. It has no balance, it has no merit.
Right, we're off to a flyer. Thank you very much. God, right, chomping at the bit. Now, as Nigel Farage reveals that 2/3 of refugees that migrated to Denmark in 1992 now have serious criminal records. Should the UK open its doors to Palestinian refugees? Danish MP Peter Koppel joins us very shortly to give his expert insight. But up next in The Clash, as the clowns from Just Stop Oil attempt to block a bus transporting migrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge, I will take on the Eco Group spokesperson Emma Brown in what promises to be a fiery clash. That is next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Anne Widdecombe coming up on the pro-Palestine protests outside Downing Street. But first, it's time for The Clash. And migrants were all set to return to the Baby Stockholm barge today, 2 months after they were first evacuated following the discovery of Legionella. But in a quite unusual twist, actually, Just Stop Oil sent a mob of eco-zealots to try and block the bus transporting them to the barge. Have a look at this.
Guys, if you sit down in front of it, sit down in front of
it. Everyone sit down!
So the unswerving driver ultimately ploughed on through this obstruction of tangerine loons to drop the migrants off. What I found, absolutely hilarious, and it never ceases to crack me up, this, is that when people deliberately put themselves in positions of danger or massive levels of annoyance to the public and then get hysterical when somebody decides to not do exactly what they want. So you stand in front of a coach, which is a massive vehicle with a driver in it, and then when he continues to driving, you release footage on Twitter with, like, threats to kill. This guy's tried to kill me. No, you've got in the way of a bus driver. That's what's happened there. But anyway, I am asking tonight, were Just Stop Oil wrong to attempt to block a bus? Let me know your thoughts. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me @gbnews. And while you're there, go and vote in our poll. on Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. I'll bring you those results very shortly. I'm pleased to say that joining me now to defend her group's actions is Just Stop Oil spokesperson Emma Brown. Emma, thank you very, very much. Do you not think that it was all a little bit pathetic, that?
No, I don't think it's pathetic to try and put yourself against harm's way. You know, this coachload of people being put onto a barge, which has been called by the Fire Brigades Union, potentially a floating Grenfell. Those words were echoed by a whistleblower from the Dorset Council. I think it's perfectly right to try and take direct action to stop that happening.
But why is Just Stop Oil doing it? This is the thing. I mean, another way to describe that barge, I don't know, have you ever been on the barge, Emma?
Have you seen pictures and testimony, Patrick?
Oh, yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, Emma. I'm glad you have, actually, because our Home and Security editor, Mark White, physically went on the barge and we did a live hit from inside the barge. So we know it quite well here. And to be honest with you, it's absolutely fine, really. So I just wonder why Just Stop Oil have decided to wade in on something like the migrant crisis. I would have thought you'd have enough on stopping us all from burning to death.
Do you understand what happens when we burn fossil fuels in terms of the effects of that, Patrick?
Yeah, I get a lot cheaper energy and more efficiently than the way that you want me to do it, yeah.
OK, so I live in Scotland, and right now we've got a warning, a red weather warning that's a threat to health, and we're expecting 48
it's a storm in Scotland, Emma.
48 hours worth of rain. There's going to be a month worth of rain, sorry. So that is an impact. It might flood people's homes, businesses. It's going to ruin a lot of crops.
Emma,
so
it's a storm in Scotland.
We're seeing all over the world.
It's windy in Scotland, is what you're telling me. It's coming up to November, and it's a bit windy and rainy in Scotland, yeah?
Patrick, that's a complete falsehood that you're manipulating that fact. You know, we've seen floods in Scotland. We've seen entire areas of extreme weather, places that are not normally flooded, and this is happening all over the world. Okay. You know, half of Pakistan being underwater. So what I'm saying is, when we burn fossil fuels and it causes extreme weather events, that means that you haven't got access to food. If your crops fail, that might mean your home is flooded. It might mean you're living in an area which is so hot it's uninhabitable. Yeah. And when that happens, I would take my children and go somewhere safer. And that is what is happening.
I do understand that there is extreme weather in Scotland right now. I'm not trying to diminish the impact that it's having on people's lives. What I am trying to make the point is that there is quite often extreme weather. We've had floods that have lost lives, for example, in the Lake District going back years, all sorts of stuff. It's not necessarily completely new. Also, Emma, I would like to politely say that a lot of the people, in fact, the vast majority of the people coming across the channel on small boats are fleeing other human beings from countries like, say, Iran or Afghanistan, not the environmental conditions. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, so, of course. So we have we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights, and you know why that was set up, don't you, Patrick? It's to protect people fleeing war, persecution.
Yeah, but why are you getting involved with that? Why are Just Stop Oil getting involved with that? That's an issue. I mean, shouldn't you be? Why don't you? Why don't you then go and campaign in places where there are rampant human rights abuses? I mean, I don't see you going and trying to stand in front of a bus in Iran, for example. You wouldn't be able to. You know that.
If you've got me on the programme, obviously, to try and create some kind of clash, but I'm just trying to get you to join the dots here. If we continue extracting and burning fossil fuels, opening 100 new oil and gas fields, we are contributing to destroying people's homelands, to destroying areas which are already suffering. If we keep burning fossil fuels, those areas are going to become increasingly difficult to live in. So we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be doing that. And for those innocent people who have been caught up in this, who are suffering, just like they are in Europe, in Africa.
Do you know for a fact, Emma, do you know for a fact if anyone on that bus was fleeing the environmental problems? Do you know that?
There are so many. Even a lot of wars are being caused by environmental problems because
so you know for a fact. It's just because in the past we've had people who thought they were doing really good work for asylum seekers and refugees, like for example trying to stop some of them getting deported, and then it turned out that some of those people that were getting deported were rapists and murderers. And that was a problem. So are you absolutely certain, 100%, that the people that were on that coach that you tried to block there were fleeing and we're needing sanctuary in this country for environmental reasons. And by the way, if the answer to that is yes, and you are certain, then what kind of environmental issue are they fleeing in France?
The people on that bus have come here. There are no safe and legal routes, by the way, Patrick. You know that, and nobody ever says that there are no safe and legal routes. They are coming here to have their asylum claims registered, and while they are doing so, they should be in humane conditions, not being put on a prison boat. This is how we start leaning towards concentration camps. If you isolate people from communities...
Right, this is... No, right, I'm sorry, but this is where you lose people. Emma, this is where you lose people, right? You go from...
No, this is where
no, I'm telling you, how dare you come out and start talking about concentration camps in Britain? There is nothing similar to housing people in, by the way, a boat that has already housed a load of people who, you know, either are military people or work in deep-sea rigs or things like that. There is no comparison between that and Auschwitz. How dare you make that comparison? It's this kind of hysterical analysis, right, that means that you lose people. You go from saying, oh, it's too hot outside, to you're going to boil in your own sweat.
OK, have you heard of the Boer War, Patrick? Because the British actually first invented concentration camps during the Boer War.
Right, which were nothing like this boat.
Auschwitz, it means forcing people into small, cramped conditions where they don't have any contact with the outside world and they lose a lot of their rights.
But they do have contact with the outside world. Emma, they can get outside anytime they like. They don't even have a permanent time restriction, Emma. They can get on a taxpayer-funded bus into the local town.
People's homelands. We are contributing to destroying
Emma, they freely come here. They have freely come here to this country. They can get out of that barge anytime they like. They are free to roam. It is nothing like a concentration camp. What are you on about?
Patrick, have you not heard of the Rwanda policy?
Oh, great. Yeah, I have. That's nothing like a concentration camp either.
Take them away and just fly them to another country. That is not being part of the European Convention on Human Rights. And that was set up because so many people died. So many innocent civilians died during World War II because people wouldn't let them into their countries. And that was why, you know, that was horrific. And this is why we...
And this is nothing like that. Yeah,
and this is why lots of people in this country have got, you know, this is a country of immigration.
How many refugees have you got living with you?
Countries as well.
Emma, how many refugees or asylum seekers have you got living with you, just out of interest? A couple?
I rent one room because we're in a currently, you know... Pardon?
You've not got the space.
I rent one bedroom, Patrick. How many spare rooms do you have, Patrick? How much have you sold your soul for to present this programme, which is creating vitriolic hatred and trying to stop people, you know, stop action on the climate crisis, which is going to affect all of us? What I'm saying is, how are you?
I just wonder why you don't decide that surely you could, you know, have an asylum seeker round on your couch, or you could put some bunk beds up in your living room. You've got a bit of space behind it. I mean, if you care so much about it, what are you doing other than sitting in front of a coach dressed in orange, screaming at a bus driver who went to work today, thinking that he's already got a difficult job, and then you lot rock up? You know, what are you actually doing?
A lot of us do work in this area. A lot of us work for Positive Action, which is a refugee organisation, or other organisations, and we do help people. But that is a massive distraction. What we're saying is we need direct action to stop the government imposing these cruel, cruel policies, because we are all human beings. And if my child's life was in danger, I would want safe sanctuary, and I would want a decent place to live and to be allowed to work and to be allowed to be free. And so would you. And the climate crisis is coming for everyone.
I think the reason why I choose to live here, and I think if you're being honest as well, the reason why you choose to live and potentially work, I don't know if you do work here, is because actually you really, if you're being honest, recognise that this is one of the best countries in the world. I mean, I don't see... Are you going to go and protest in China at any point? Where it matters? No?
I'm not going to dignify that question with a response.
Why not? Because
I'm British, and increasingly...
But even if we did everything that you want, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference. It wouldn't make a blind bit of difference if we did everything that you want, if China carries on doing it.
Let me just ask you one question. Have you heard of the Rosebank oil field? You've heard of it? So you know that one oil field, which is in our waters, one of 100, is going to emit more carbon emissions.
And if we stop doing that, what we're going to end up doing, are we not, is going to end up importing a load of oil, etc., from despotic Islamist regimes in the Middle East instead, or Russia. So why not just use our own?
Nonsense. That's such nonsense. We need to get off oil and gas. You know, of course, Russia can shut off gas supply, can't they? Russia cannot shut off the wind, Patrick. That is a way more energy efficient and a way more energy secure way to get your energy. So that is a ridiculous argument. We just need to get off.
How much of the UK today was fueled by wind power, Emma?
Our lives are in danger. And if you don't believe that, I'm sorry, but if you do not listen, then you're going to feel the effects of that heat wave that we saw in London. 60 homes burned down.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Emma, I really enjoyed the heat wave. I've got to be honest with you, Emma, I welcome the heat wave. I love the heat wave. We could do with a little bit of it now. Emma, thank you very, very much. Interesting stuff. All right, there we go. Sean on Twitter says, what has stopping a coach full of migrants got to do with a sham climate emergency? Just Stop Oil were only out to make a name for themselves and grab the headlines today. Molly on Twitter says, I wonder if they are going to add Just Stop Refugees to the franchise. If so, I think they might gain a lot more followers. Wes on Twitter says, of course, they're constantly in the wrong. Just Stop Oil are total hypocrites. They lecture us about the environment, but they all use cars and planes. One thing I will say is, genuinely, I will say this about Just Stop Oil, is that they are incredibly passionate about that cause, clearly, and they always, pretty much always, say yes to coming on and talking and having debates like the one that we've just had. So fair play to them. Fair play to them. Also, someone said something about a climate scam. I think I'm now legally obliged to say there's not a climate scam, but there we go. 86% of you in our poll agree that Just Stop Oil were wrong to attempt to stop migrants boarding the Bibi Stockholm, while 14% of you say that they weren't. There we go. Coming up, as anti-Semitic chants are heard as a pro-Palestine protest outside Downing Street, do police need to be tougher on these kinds of demonstrations? Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe joins me to discuss that very, very shortly. But next, as Nigel Farage reveals that 2/3 of refugees that migrated to Denmark in 1992 now have serious criminal records, should the UK open its doors to Palestinian refugees? Danish MP Peter Koppel gives his expert analysis. That's live and that's next. I'll see you in 2.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio. Now, despite the escalating war between Israel and Hamas, neighbouring countries Egypt and Jordan have ruled out accepting refugees from the conflict. And a bombshell new report using a case study from Denmark, just released by Nigel Farage on his GB News show, shows that the Prime Minister may be best advised to do the same. Have a watch of this.
In 1992, Denmark gave refuge to 321 Palestinians. By 2019, the government produced results for what had happened to them. 64% of those that had been given refuge had obtained criminal records. 34% of their children had obtained criminal records. And bear in mind, many of the children hadn't yet grown up. And the vast majority were living on welfare. That particular influx of refugees that went in to Denmark proved to be a mistake and a complete disaster.
Right, well, there we go. So to discuss these shocking figures, I am now joined by Danish MEP Peter Koppel. Peter, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So we've heard here Humza Yousaf, our leader in Scotland, say that we should take in a load of Palestinian refugees. What would you say to that based on the Danish experience?
Thank you for having me here. I would say no, no, no. That would be completely insane. I mean, just look into the Danish statistics. It's all public. You can go to Google. You can see the numbers. It has been a completely disaster in Denmark. And I believe the politicians back then made the worst investment ever for the Danish future.
Okay, I mean, why? You know, what happened? I mean, what was the thing? Because, you know, look, let's be honest. I mean, you know, loads of Danish people, I imagine, will commit crime as well. Crime is not just the preserve of, you know, Palestinians, is it? So, go on, what was so especially bad?
Well, if you compare these group of people to the Danish citizens, you would see that they are way more criminals than the Danish population in general, first of all. But the thing is, those people were not even real refugees. I mean, when many of them were granted asylum seeking, they decided to go back to their own country to celebrate. So it's not even real refugees as we know them. So I would very much advise you to stop taking those people. It will give you problems for generations, honestly.
So just say that to me again. So you granted asylum to a load of Palestinian refugees who then went back to Gaza to celebrate, and then came back to Denmark.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That possibly should have set alarm bells ringing, I suppose. But was there a big push? Was there a big push from the Danish public? You know, people who thought they were doing a nice thing, people who thought they were doing the right thing initially. Presumably, you were under a lot of pressure.
This was a case where the government, the authorities, were under huge pressure from a party called the Radical Left and the Socialistic People's Party. So imagine the debate back then in the 90s. If you warned against these people, if you said, well, they could be way more criminal than a regular Danish person, you would be called a racist. You might even have lost your job. So it was quite difficult back then, but today, I believe that not even the Social Democrats would do anything as stupid as back in the 90s.
Well, you'd be surprised, because we have a chap in charge of the Scottish National Party who is very keen to do exactly that by the sounds of things. Let me just ask this, Peter, to you and say, hey, you know, maybe this was down to the poor socio-economic circumstances of them moving to Denmark, that they had to resort to crime in order to pay their way. They weren't given opportunities. It was an inevitability.
No, I would say that Denmark is a Scandinavian welfare state that will feed everybody coming here. So if you are not able to have success under these circumstances, you would never have success anywhere in the world. So this is a complete social state taking care of feeding everybody here. So there is absolutely no reason to commit art crimes as some of those people did. A lot of them, actually.
OK, fair enough. Look, Peter, thank you very much. And can I just ask as well, any plans to take any refugees from the current conflict taking place over there?
No, no plans.
OK. Peter, thank you very much. It's Peter Koffel there, who is a Danish MEP. I really appreciate you coming on, Peter. It's great to have your input on the show. Now, coming up, after Just Stop Oil blocks a bus transporting migrants from the Bibi Stockholm barge, are the police right to preemptively arrest its ringleaders? This was the Just Stop Oil story that we were originally going to do before they rocked up and sat in front of a bus for a bit. Or actually, is it authoritarian overreach from the police to make preemptive arrests? We have footage of those arrests, actually, to bring you, which is quite interesting. My panel of top pundits will discuss that later tonight. But first, as anti-Semitic chants are heard at a pro-Palestine protest outside Downing Street, do police need to be tougher on those kind of demonstrations? Former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe joins me to discuss that, and that is next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order. Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, still to come, but it's time now for former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. And last night, hundreds of pro-Palestine protesters gathered outside Downing Street after the devastating hospital blast in Gaza. At GB News, we interviewed some of the demonstrators, and here's what they had to say.
I just hope that the world leaders understand what's happening is genocide in Gaza.
It's simple, free Palestine, it's as simple as that.
As a Muslim, I understand that Zionism and Zionists, they are the primary beneficiaries of Islamophobia in the UK. So if we want to tackle Islamophobia, and Muslims should be at the forefront of tackling Islamophobia, we also have to tackle Zionism.
Killing thousands and thousands of children, dropping bombs on hospitals, it's just unwarranted.
But perhaps in a more sinister term, protesters were heard chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has called an anti-Semitic slogan. And, as you can see here, the attendees also completely blocked the streets of Whitehall to take part in a mass call to prayer. Well, Anne Widdecombe joins me now. Thank you very much, Anne. Great to have you on the show. So, look, isn't the police's job to stop well, let's deal with two separate things here. The alleged anti-Semitism that took place first and foremost with the, to the river, to the sea stuff. Couldn't you throw a giant net over that protest and go, right, anyone chanting that is an anti-Semite and that's a hate crime?
I think you have two things going on here. First of all, you've got the issue of free speech, that there are people who believe that the settlement in Israel is unfair. And I don't object to their being able to say that. I certainly don't object to people praying. I'm never going to object to that. But in the current situation, where tensions are very, very high, that particular chant, which might sort of just pass muster in peaceful times, is undeniably provocative. And it is the case at the moment that a lot of the Jewish community are very afraid. And it is the police's job to protect them. And, when we hear about dropping bombs on hospitals, at the moment we're not quite certain what happened. But nobody would deliberately drop a bomb on a hospital. But certainly Hamas did quite deliberately slaughter babies and old folk. So, I think that's what we've just got to keep remembering. It wasn't Israel that started this.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you a bit about the mass call to prayer? Well, certainly, it's unusual in the sense that, it's Whitehall, it's outside Downing Street, it's by the cenotaph. We don't usually, at that particular time and every single evening, have hundreds of people doing the Islamic call to prayer. So just in itself, it's unusual. Now, some people have said that they found it a bit disturbing. Other people have said this is a visible sign of multicultural Britain working, there for all to see. What was your kind of initial take of that, then?
I don't think I wouldn't adopt either of those two positions. I don't think it's a demonstration of multicultural Britain necessarily. As I say, I'm never going to object to people praying. I'm never going to object to people praying collectively as a group. I only wish Christians did it rather more often and rather more visibly, so I don't object to that. But as I said right at the beginning, what you've got to do is put everything at the moment in the context of what is going on. And a vast group of people praying, Muslims praying, that vast group might well be intimidating to British Jews. And it's a question of checks and balances. And I think the police have got to deal with cases individually. I mean, if you've got somebody shouting, "Wipe out the state of Israel," you arrest that person. You don't mess around.
I think it's
you arrest that person.
I think it's possibly unfortunate for some people that, now, because of that, it's been conflated, the idea of people praying in a street at that particular time of the day, and then also the horrific context of what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and then some debatably anti-Semitic chanting taking place, and it kind of gets lumped all into one, really. But they are separate issues, and it is important to make that clear. And are you worried about anti-Semitism in Britain? Do you think we're doing enough to stop that?
Probably not. but it's quite difficult to know what to do. As I said, I think the police have to deal with this on an individual basis. If somebody is trying quite deliberately to promote anti-Semitism, then you arrest that person. Equally, one has to allow that there is a debate about the Palestinian areas, and there is a debate about the future of the Middle East. That can't be stopped. But as you say, at the moment, there's a horrible conflation going on, and I suspect that
it's a powder keg. It's a powder keg, definitely. Can I just get you on something else while I've got you, Anne, if that's all right? So, there's an interview with The Standard now. Sir Keir Starmer said on the trans issue, there is a small minority of people that don't identify with the gender they were born into. And I don't think we can simply disregard that. We need a fairer way of dealing with it. He also claimed that Labour has clarified their position. However, J.K. Rowling begs to differ. It comes after the Mail on Sunday reported that deliberately calling someone by the wrong gender pronouns could become a hate crime and land you 2 years in jail. Well, J.K. Rowling said she'd happily do 2 years in jail. And what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, considering the state of the jails at the moment, considering that we're actually proposing to release dangerous prisoners and the judges are actually delaying sending other dangerous criminals into jail because apparently we haven't got enough places, Keir Starmer actually wants to fill the jails up for people who believe that there are only two sexes. I mean, it is an absolute lunacy. And as for saying, as if he suddenly discovered it, that there's a very small number of people, and it is vanishingly small, who do suffer from real gender dysphoria. And they do go through sometimes highly complicated and very painful procedures. That's been going on for years. I can remember James Morris becoming Jan Morris. Keir Starmer just caught up with us. And he's using something which we all know has existed for a very long time to try and justify something completely different. Self-identity is a nonsense. Genuine gender dysphoria is very much a minority, but it's not a nonsense.
And strong stuff, as ever. Always wonderful to have you on the show. It's the amazing Anne Widdecombe there. Now, coming up, we're just a few minutes away from the polls slamming shut in a pivotal pair of by-elections for the Conservatives. So the people of Tamworth and Mid-Bedfordshire have now cast their votes in what could very well be a telling set of results ahead of the general election next year. It is important stuff, this. Possibly more interesting than it sounds. I'll be joined live in the studio by former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena to get some immediate reaction to that, so don't you dare move. But next, after Just Stop Oil blocks a bus transporting migrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge, are the police right to preemptively arrest its ringleaders, or is this just an authoritarian overreach? My panel will thrash that one out, and that is next. Stay tuned.
Hello, very good evening. I'm Alex Burkle, and here's your latest GB News weather update. Storm Babette is going to bring a lot of rain and some very windy weather across many parts, particularly the northeast, through the next 24 hours. We are sandwiched between a blocking high towards the northeast of us and low pressure towards the southwest, but because of that high, this frontal system in the north isn't going anywhere particularly fast. That's why the rainfall totals are going to continue to build up across eastern Scotland in particular as we go through the next day or so. Very high rainfall totals could be in excess of 200 millimetres for some parts. It is going to be a mild night with lots of wet and windy weather around, temperatures not dropping much, and gusts of winds coming in from the east of around 60-70 miles per hour for some eastern coastal parts. Friday then is going to be a wet picture for many of us. Heavy rain across Northern Ireland into northern England, and rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, which is why some severe disruption is quite likely. Towards the southwest though, a dry picture with a scattering of showers, and here temperatures a few degrees above average for the time of year. Elsewhere feeling cooler with the wind and the rain. It is going to be another wet day for many eastern northeastern areas on Saturday. The rain not quite as heavy as we go through Friday, but likely to cause some further issues because of the heavy rain that it's coming on the back of. Otherwise, it's a drier picture for many parts of England and Wales with a scattering of showers. Sunday looks like a quieter day with more showers possible by next week.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio. It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's, and this is GB News Tonight. Now, eco-zealots and illegal immigrants unite. Yes, as Just Stop Oil protesters block a bus transporting migrants back to the Bibby Stockholm barge. Is it fair for the police to preemptively arrest the protest group's ringleaders? That's the big debate with my top panel of pundits. That's also next. And tonight I am joined by Alison Pearson, Lord Bailey and Amy Nicole-Turner. Top panel. Plus, the polls in Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth by-elections slammed shut just seconds ago. But would losing these true blue seats spell trouble for the Tories ahead of next year's general election? Former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena joins me live in the studio as the Conservatives try to cling on to the constituency they've held for almost a century. Also coming up, with cult lingerie brand Victoria's Secret sacking off plus-size and transgender models to return to the brand's traditionally sexy roots after suffering a steep drop in sales. Is the fashion industry finally accepting that if you go woke, you go broke? We will thrash that one out in the media buzz. And before the night's out, our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, beam in to offer their forensic royal analysis of Harry and Meghan's next big house move. Yes, it looks like they're coming back to Britain. And the King's warning to Brits about the perils of cancel culture. There will also be a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass crowned before the night's out. And the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, they're on the way as well. Right after your news with Aaron Armstrong.
Hello there, very good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. The Prime Minister has urged Saudi Arabia to use its influence to achieve stability in the Middle East. The Prime Minister and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman agreed to work together to avoid further escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. It was during a meeting in Riyadh. The Prime Minister will meet other Arab leaders as part of a two-day trip to capitals in the region. In Jerusalem earlier, the Prime Minister vowed to stand in solidarity with Israel in a meeting with his counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli leader thanked Rishi Sunak, calling his visit a strong statement of support in a time of darkness. Rishi Sunak, though, stressed that Israel must adhere to international law in Gaza and that the conflict must not spread elsewhere.
I've had
good, productive conversations with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli President Herzog. Among other things, we discussed the importance of this conflict not escalating regionally and the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza to help people who need it. I also had the opportunity to meet families of British nationals who have been taken hostage. We're doing absolutely everything we can to get them home.
Well, 9 Britons are now known to have died in the Hamas attacks earlier this month, with 7 still missing. Israel, meanwhile, continues to strike what it calls Hamas targets in Gaza. Palestinian authorities say more than 3,700 people have died there and some 12,000 have been injured. Israel's defence minister has told troops they'll soon see Gaza from the inside ahead of an expected ground offensive. The international charity Action Against Hunger says the lack of food and water in Gaza is leading to a health crisis on the brink of explosion. However, Egypt's state media is reporting that the Rafah crossing will open for a few hours tomorrow to allow aid into Gaza. Joe Biden, the US president, announced yesterday he'd secured a deal with Egypt to open the crossing and allow 20 lorries of humanitarian aid in. More than 100 lorries are queuing on the Egyptian side of the border, with the UN saying it is desperately needed. Asylum seekers have returned to the Baby Stock home in Portland, despite activists attempting to prevent it from happening. Just Stop Oil protesters obstructed a coach carrying migrants, holding banners that read "No prison ships" and "Demand humanity." All 39 people were removed from the barge in August after Legionella bacteria was discovered. And a 57-year-old woman has died after being swept into a river in Angus in Scotland. A storm Babette batters the country. The red weather warning means there's a risk to life, with extensive flooding and winds more than 70 miles an hour forecast. And more than 400 homes have been asked to evacuate in Brecon, and thousands more have been left without power. They're facing unprecedented amounts of rain. Meanwhile, 4 flood warnings have been issued for parts of northern England and the Midlands. Storm Babette sweeping southwards on Friday. So do look out for yourself if the weather's bad where you are. That's it for the moment. Now it's back to Patrick.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages, hot off the press. We start with the Metro. I mean, the one that it says there is different to the one that I've got in front of me here, but it says "Get out now," and they've got pictures of what appears to be stormy weather. I'll tell you the one that I've got in front of me here. I don't know if we can come back to me, but it's a fantastic front page, and I hope this is indeed what they decide to run with on the day. It is "Armed police swoop on water pistol boy." Yes, it just sounds like the worst superhero name ever, doesn't it? Water pistol boy. Armed police rammed a boy off his bike and held him at gunpoint, for having a bright blue water pistol, and it was mistaken for a real gun. So hopefully they go for that over stormy weather. We move on to The Independent now, don't we? Not before time. This is, yes, good, a picture of Rishi Sunak and Benjamin Netanyahu. "We back your right to go after Hamas. We want you to win," the PM tells Israel. "You have a duty to defend yourself in your darkest hour." Netanyahu, and this, by the way, for me was the big line of the day, and I think arguably should be quite concerning for people, especially the British taxpayer, is that Benjamin Netanyahu says he's preparing the country for a long war against the worst monsters of the planet. The cynic in me would say that Netanyahu knows that his days are numbered, and the longer the war goes on, the longer he can stay in power. But that would just be the cynic in me. We're going to go to the Daily Mail now. There is no forgiveness for this thing. A big picture here of young Israeli soldiers, OK? They go, "Only total annihilation of Hamas. You will soon see Gaza from the inside." That's a dramatic address by Israel's defence minister to the troops massed on the border. And you know what would be kind of bleak, but really kind of depressing, I suppose, is that these faces that you're seeing here now, you know, a couple of weeks into a incredibly bloody hand-to-hand street and tunnel-based combat situation in Gaza with that terrorist group, you just can't help but wonder how many of those individuals will actually be coming back. But my panel are with me: Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, we've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey, we've got author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Now, with the eco-zealots Just Stop Oil planning on causing unprecedented disruption in a series of protests in London later this month, police officers swept in to preemptively arrest co-founder co-founders of the group, Roger Hallam and Indigo Rumbelow. I know. In two dramatic dawn raids earlier this week, the arrests come as the so-called climate activists targeted the government's immigration policy earlier today in a failed attempt to block a bus transporting migrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge. But, Alison, were the police right to preemptively arrest the group's ringleaders? Was that all right, do you think?
I do think Just Stop Oil are the most irritating people in the country, and as we've seen, nearly all of their activists are incredibly posh, privately educated kids, you know, Indigo and Constantinople and, you know, that sort of privileged kid. But having said that, I think this is massive overreach by the police. They haven't, these people they arrested, they broke into they went into their homes, confiscated possessions. They haven't actually done anything. Now, Patrick, if that's only acceptable if there's a major terrorist attack planned and they have information, and even if it's terrorism, you have to get a judge. You know,
I am. It's all right. So it's not your fault. It's mine, actually. I'm gonna cut in here and just say that I think let's keep the conversation about, because obviously arrests have been made. Let's keep the conversation more about the general principle of preemptive arrest. So that was my fault, not yours. So, you know, is it a bit of overreach, really, do you think, the idea? Because it could happen to me or you, couldn't it?
I think that people will be familiar with the Tom Cruise film Minority Report, where people they have people predicting crime and people are basically arrested for crimes they haven't yet committed. This has a worrying echo of that for me.
Do you know what, though? I'm all for it. I'm all for preemptive arrest.
What is going on here? You two are flipped completely. Lock them up.
Well,
I thought we were going to agree for once.
It's really
This is
obvious
terrible.
that Rishi Sunak is going to break the law because net zero is enshrined in law. So let's send Tom Cruise in.
OK, I see. Well, yeah, I wonder who's taller, actually, Tom Cruise or Rishi Sunak. Because apparently Tom Cruise might have to always be filmed on a box and then he'd have to wrestle. Anyway, we digress massively. Look, Sean, where are you on this? Because I can get that groups like Just Stop Oil, very annoying, and you wouldn't want them to necessarily go out and, you know, potentially cost the economy billions. It's not just disruption, by the way. It just costs the economy. It costs you and I money.
There's two things to say. As long as the police treat everybody the same and proportionate, so they cause great disruption, so they need to be dealt with great vigour, but also, as well, they have a history, a track record. So we've talked about, if the police have information about some activity they're about to carry out, they should preemptively do that, but they have to have that information, and they mustn't treat Just Oil any differently. I am no fan of their antics, but they do have the right to protest, but they have been breaking the law in their protest, it would appear to.
And again, why don't they arrest them when they're actually stuck to the motorway?
It's too late, because it's too late.
Also, we were a bit jaded. This kind of divided opinion, you know, with the coronation, OK, where we had those Not My King brigade with the big yellow banners, and the police went, right, not today, lads, and swooped in, nicked them, and then basically had to apologise and release them.
But they also preemptively arrested somebody who wasn't even involved in the protest. And
they
poor
did,
lady who'd, like, rocked up in her like glamour to watch the.
But then you see, this was the thing, because I was very conflicted by that, and I'm kind of quite conflicted by potentially actions like this. I'll have to wait and see what pans out, of course. But this idea of I didn't want the coronation disrupted by a load of these people, so I am quite happy that they were off the streets. But it sets a dangerous precedent, no?
It's a free country, allegedly.
Well.
So really, you shouldn't be. You know, the Queen would have, and the King indeed now would have absorbed that. They're bigger than a few nutters waving placards. I think we absolutely mustn't compromise the basic free principles of the country. So I think swooping in to arrest people on the grounds that they may interrupt something.
I tell you why Alison does have a point, because the problem is now the police. Yeah, because the police have.
I think you've got a point.
They've been manoeuvred. They've been manoeuvred into the place where much of their activities now dictated by the newspaper, by politics, and that's the problem. If everybody thought that they did have some information and they were acting even-handedly, it'd be one thing. But we all know now, pressure is applied to the police through the newspaper, whatever means, and are they acting on that rather than the law? And at this time in our history, I think the principle is more important.
OK, yeah, I mean, it does also tie in with the story I've got here on the front of the Metro, armed police swoop in on water pistol boy, which is another potentially police overreach, isn't it? But look, Amy, I suppose if someone said to you that I was going to turn up, you know, on your way to work, and you knew I was going to disrupt it, and I had previously disrupted you on your way to work 10 times already, you know, the general public would probably want the police to stop me. You would want to stop me, wouldn't you?
Well, you can't.
You wouldn't care about my human rights then.
But that's not... you can't compare that to Just Stop Oil, which is an organised protest.
It's not our system.
And also, what I always want to come back to is the disruption they've caused is minimal in contrast to the disruption
Not
of climate
minimal
change.
for the people in the back of the ambulance, though, is it?
No.
But here we go. Right, so now, the crisis in the Middle East requires world leaders of steely resolve, impeccable competence, bold ambition. Take a look at US President Joe Biden's press briefing on board a plane out of Israel and tell me if you think he's up to the job.
Virtually every mass shooting, every circumstance where a large number of people have been victimized and lost, I've spoken to. I learned a long time ago what you've all learned in your life.
Oh, I mean, come on. Come on. It's cruel. It's cruel on this guy. I really seriously do think it is actually unfair on Joe Biden to keep him in power. You can't be behaving like that. Just put a blanket over him, push him towards the looking window. But is that man really running the world's greatest superpower? Even more shocking is his clearly declining 80-year-old is planning to run for office again next year. He's not run anywhere, is he? He's going to shuffle to office next year. Against Donald Trump, no less. Sleepy Joe flew to Germany as he announced $100 million in aid for humanitarian assistance in Gaza. Although even he admitted that there was a chance that it would end up in the hands of Hamas. The whole thing is just insane. Insane. Sean, this guy's got to go.
Do you know, I think they need to get the Vice President to take some more of the burden. It doesn't matter
She's terrible.
Hold on, she is terrible, but he's beginning seriously to look incapable. He clearly didn't know what was going on at that moment.
No.
If that was one of my parents, I would have intervened. And this man, he could say something.
He has moments of clarity.
Come on.
But he does.
But Alison, he could say something that causes a real world problem.
Or do
It's not funny anymore. It's not funny. They need to get someone else to help him out.
Amy, is it any wonder that Putin has had a bang on Ukraine and that now Hamas have decided to do what they've done in Israel and goodness knows what else?
I mean,
if I was China, I'd be looking at Taiwan going, oh, here we go.
I don't know. I don't think that's entirely fair because, you know, Joe Biden knows foreign diplomacy inside out and knows the situation in the Middle East better than perhaps anyone. So
hang on a minute.
He's done all right.
Did you see the video?
I saw the video, but look
also
at his
he's given
career.
billions to Iran. I'm sorry, this is not a man. If he knows international diplomacy inside out, he's messed it up. He's given billions to Iran.
Look, Alison, I'm no Trump fan, but would this stuff have been happening under Donald Trump? I don't think so, I'm afraid.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Trump was, you know...
Look, do you think that the kindest thing to do is to just... You know, someone put an arm round Joe Biden and
What
say,
have you suggested?
He won't even know. Just tell him he's still president.
Put a blanket over him.
Just tell him he's still president. Just go, all right, Joe, we're going over here now, where you're going to be president over here, in a farm somewhere in Utah.
If you put the clips to one side, he's doing OK.
You can't put the clips to one side. Look,
if you ignore him, if you ignore the president.
The incredible thing is he says he's going to do another term. That's the incredible thing.
He can't.
And I tell you what, I'm just telling you what he said.
I know, yeah.
And the campaign in America is long and brutal. I wonder if it's right to put him through that again.
I actually just physically don't think he could. And you know what I think it does? It makes a mockery of the idea of American democracy, because they make a massive virtue of this in America, as indeed they should. They go out and they lecture the world, they fight the world very often over democracy, and then they have a bloke there who, in my view, absolutely cannot be running the country. He cannot be running the country. So the people have gone out to vote for something and vote for someone who is not pulling the levers of power.
The question is, who is running the country? If you're an American, you voted for Joe Biden, somebody else would appear to be in charge. And at least tell us who that person is. And that's why I say I'm astonished that they're selling him as doing another term.
But the greatest democracy in the world and still no female leader. I mean, it looks pathetic, really. I mean, some of the Middle Eastern countries, you know, Israel had Golda Meir and so on. It just looks terrible, and they're they're addicted to having the gerontocracy. You know, very elderly men. There must be a country of hundreds of millions of people. There has to be. They could go randomly in a Starbucks and pick someone.
Well, there's no way. If that's the best that America's got to offer, then good grief. Well, coming up, with the cult lingerie brand Victoria's Secret reportedly sacking off plus-size and transgender models to return to the brand's traditionally sexy roots. That's after suffering a steep drop in sales. Some would say they went bust. Is the fashion industry... Thank you. It took a while. Is the fashion industry finally accepting that if you go woke, you go broke? My panel will return to debate that next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. More of those front pages have just been delivered. Let's go to the eye, shall we? So, fear grows that war will spread as UK and US tell their citizens to leave Lebanon. I'm just going to read some of the blurb underneath here. British, American and German citizens are ordered to leave Lebanon amid fears of a wider conflict. The UK government ministers also accused the BBC coverage of undermining diplomacy in the Middle East. I think it's fair to say the BBC have had a bad war so far, haven't they? BBC chief confronted by the Culture Secretary, and Rishi Sunak flies to Saudi Arabia for emergency talks. I think, actually, I don't very often say this, I think it's a good front pages from the Eye because I think they're right. Fears should be growing about the idea of a spread in the war, especially given that Benjamin Netanyahu was talking already about a long conflict. What does that really mean? But more on the media buzz now with my panel of top pundits. Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Conservative peer Lord Sean Bailey and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Now, American underwear company Victoria's Secret is reportedly returning to its hypersexualised roots after failed attempts to rebrand as being more inclusive. The retailer had scrapped their catwalk, quote, angels, such as Miranda Kerr and Cara Delevingne, for plus-sized and even transgender models. In fact, the world's wokest woman, retired American footballer Megan Rapinoe, featured in the image reboot. But execs are now reportedly making a sharp U-turn after sales plummeted by 5% last year, with the brand's revenue a whopping $1.3 million below what it was in 2019. So, Alison, should the fashion industry say no to going woke?
My attitude, Patrick, is that if I want to look at diverse bodies in bra and knickers, I can look at my own bathroom mirror in the morning. I quite like to see very attractive people in the adverts.
I think, without the risk of traversing this minefield catastrophically, I think the reflection that you see in your bathroom mirror would be lovely.
It's OK, but I'm not Cara Delevingne. Now, let's be realistic, OK?
Which is probably a good thing, actually.
So I think what's happening here, advertising is aspirational. Now, the company, Victoria's Secrets, they got rave reviews from the fashionistas saying, oh, isn't it marvellous you're being diverse? The customers, it didn't translate into sales, the company said.
No, it didn't.
Why didn't it translate into sales? Because everyone at home is thinking, if I'm going to buy a nice new bra and knickers for quite a lot of money, I'd quite like to see it on somebody I'd like to aspire to be. That's what's gone wrong.
Sean, if you said to your lovely lady, right, if you went out and bought her something from Victoria's Secret, you would, I dare say, want her to look like one of the catwalk angels, not necessarily look at someone and go, I wanted you to look like,
I'm fairly sure if I did that, I wouldn't buy the one that was modelled by a man. Because I'm not buying.
No, thank you. Right. Well,
I'm not buying from men. Look, the bottom line is this. The bottom line is this. Victoria's Secret was an aspirational brand. Women bought it because they imagined themselves looking that good. So it had to be someone they wanted to be and someone they could relate to. Yeah. And without that connection, they just voted with their feet. Yeah. You saw it with Disney. People brought their children to Disney films just to have a simple story. They didn't want big political messages, so they also voted with their feet. I think what brands are realising now, people don't want to have political warfare in adverts. Have that elsewhere. They just want to come, enjoy your products and move on. And when people don't do that, when companies don't do that, people vote with their feet.
Shock horror, Amy. If you put a bloke with one leg in a thong, women don't buy it.
I'm obsessed with this cascade of nonsense coming out, all three of you. Do you not think perhaps Victoria's Secret saw a 5% drop because people have less money for underwear? And also, the last campaign was featured Bella Hadid, who was one of the original, big angels from the 2019 anyway. And Victoria's Secret have gone on record and said they have a commitment to inclusivity going forward. So this is honestly just it's a made-up story.
I think it'll be inclusivity of lots of very pretty people, would be my guess.
And what it is...
Nothing's going to change. And also, this inference that there isn't anything pretty about transgender people and plus-size women...
Again, nobody said that. What I said is about relatable. Right? Let's be clear.
A plus-size woman is far more relatable.
Yeah, and I would agree with that point. But
why don't you get plus-size male models? You don't see... You don't really.
What's that? Giacomo?
Yeah, but that's designed for massive blokes, right? It's not, you don't go...
And what they do, they put massive blokes in suits that other massive blokes can imagine themselves in. Yeah. It's about comfort, it's about relatability, it's about aspiration.
Victoria's Secret was never
and if you don't do that, and then people move. You saw it with Disney. Disney did all of this stuff in their films.
Look, if you're advertising a Porsche or a Ferrari, you don't wrap it around a lamppost first, do you, before you stick it in the advert?
Yeah.
You know, seriously, that's the thing. You advertise the nicest version of it with all the top spec.
So you are thus saying that women are expected to be thin to be the most desirable?
Not at all. Nobody said anything at all.
You're saying women that aren't that are
I think there are conventional standards of beauty when it comes to products that are designed for beauty. It's a beauty product.
But let's be, it's about, for me, it's about relatability, and I think you need to separate plus-size models and the transgender thing, because plus-size models is the size of most women, let's be clear. I'd argue that most of those Victoria-sized women are undersized, not
Absolutely.
regular. Yeah.
On that note, then, do you think that Victoria's Secret has done a disservice to women generally, potentially even set a dangerous precedent for women in the past? An undesirable, unattainable, you know, it's increased things like eating disorders.
Throughout the noughties, 100%.
No, I absolutely don't. I grew up watching Charlie's Angels. We all wanted to be Farrah Fawcett Majors or Jacqueline Smith. We didn't think, why don't I look like that? I mean, admittedly, we spent a fortune on Elnet hairspray trying to get Farrah's hair. No, I don't. All of world cinema, Patrick, is based on the fact that people like to go and look at pretty people on a big screen. Sorry, that's just human nature.
OK, right, all of you, thank you very much. A fantastic stint from our panel so far this evening. Coming up, our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, beam in to offer their forensic royal analysis of Harry and Meghan's next big house move, which, yes, could be coming to a British neighbourhood near you, and the King's warning to Brits about the perils of cancel culture. But next, the polls in the mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth by-elections slammed shut just moments ago. But would losing these true blue seats spell trouble for the Tories ahead of the next general election? We will have to wait and see, won't we? Because former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena joins me live in the studio for some instant reaction as the Conservatives try to cling on to a constituency that they've held, believe it or not, for almost a century. Who would have thought that, hey? Heck of a long time. Make sure that you keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. That is, of course, the inbox. Yes, stay tuned, because we're going to be finding out what the exit polls are saying from two seismic by-elections that, you never know, could shape the future of this country politically. Stay tuned.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, very, very shortly, I will be joined by the Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, to pick through some rather interesting royal news that could see Harry and Meghan moving back to the UK, potentially full-time, to a town near you. But before that, Tory MP, former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena joins me, and the polls have closed in today's brace of by-elections in Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, where Rishi Sunak squares up against Keir Starmer in a flavour of what's to come in next year's general elections. Now, to paint the picture and why this matters, the Conservatives have readied themselves for a battering in both seats, which are traditionally true blue strongholds. So a leaked Tory memo suggested earlier this week that in Mid-Bedfordshire, their vote share could plunge from the 60% Nadine Dorries received in 2019 to just 30%. Well, Ranil Jayawardena, results will be unveiled tomorrow morning, but how are you feeling ahead of this? Do you think this could be a disaster?
Well, I mean, it's certainly clear governments rarely win these sorts of by-elections, particularly given the context of the Tamworth by-election as well. But, you know, too early to tell at this stage. Certainly the interesting result here will be what happens in Mid-Bedfordshire, where, you know, frankly, it's the one election that the Lib Dems and the Labour Party haven't been trying to stitch it up between themselves.
So that was Nadine Dorries' seat, and she was sitting on a majority of 24,664, I think.
Yeah.
That would be, I
Very
think,
good knowledge.
Well, it might be a few votes out, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe some people voted twice. But this would be, I think, arguably the biggest swing that we've ever seen. So you can't lose that.
I hope not. And, you know, if we do, I think it really has a real, it's a real thinking point for us all, you know, compared to Uxbridge, for example.
If you do lose both of those, do you still think that Rishi Sunak's the right man to lead you into the next election?
I think everyone in the Conservative Party is united that there is no more leadership change. Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister. He is the leader. He's got to lead us into the election. But the big, important thing is we've got to have proper Conservative policy. We've actually got to get on and do things that separate us from the socialists and the other leftists.
It's not a tricky one for you, though, because if he doesn't deliver that, then he will lead you to electoral oblivion.
Well, I think we've seen some progress. You know, the Uxbridge by-election, where we did win, was because we were against Sadiq Khan's ULEZ.
Yes.
And that was a clear blue water between us and Labour. Rishi has said that he's against the anti-car cult that has infiltrated every part of our public sector. He's dealing with net zero. He's set out a different direction of travel. So we've got to hope for the best.
You've got to hope for the best. I am really pleased that you pronounced the word cult correctly there. Good grief. For a second, my heart was in my mouth. But there we go. I mean, look, what can Rishi Sunak do? I mean, if the results come back tomorrow, you know, you've lost Tamworth, you've lost Mid-Bedfordshire, etc. I mean, Keir Starmer's going to be cock-a-hoop, isn't he? He's already riding high. You didn't have a post-conference bounce that maybe some people would have expected. So that didn't happen for you. You know, it's a problem, no?
Correct. But slippery Starmer is someone that the public hasn't warmed to. You know, whether he was right or wrong, Tony Blair had a public narrative that people said, oh, yes, we'll give him a go. Actually, Starmer's not someone that I'm knocking on doors and they're saying he's someone we want to run our country. It's just that they want us to be better. So that's what we've got to get on and do and have more ambitious policy in the months ahead.
Well, come on, give us some of that. Give us some of that policy there. What is it?
Well, I mean, whether it's the anti-car cult being stopped from stopping people getting where they want, when they want, in the vehicle they want, through to thinking about our tax policy and giving people, you know, more of their own money to spend as they wish because they earned it, or scrapping inheritance tax, which is a tiny amount of income for the tax man, but actually affects people when they're at their, you know, some of their saddest points in their lives. You know, those are the sorts of things that we've got to do that the Labour Party would never do. And it would really set up a proper battle at the next election.
Do you think you make enough of the fact that Keir Starmer tried to get Jeremy Corbyn elected twice?
Well, you know, you make a very good point.
Especially like what's going on in the Middle East now. I mean, especially you know, especially given Keir Starmer's personal circumstances as well. You know, his wife, I believe, is Jewish. I find that remarkable that he was able to try to and willing to get Jeremy Corbyn elected not once but twice, given all the problems that were happening there in the Labour Party.
Well, this is why people feel that Keir Starmer is slippery. You know, he says one thing to one group of people and another thing to another. And people haven't forgotten that he was trying to get the hardest left, most socialist, maybe even communist leader that the Labour Party's ever had into office, that he wasn't in favour of getting Brexit done, that he was still trying to rejoin the EU, etc., etc. And now he says the opposite. I mean, which is it? It can't both be true.
Would you ever run for leader, do you think?
Look, you know, you never say never in this game, right? And then you know that you're really lying. Look, right now there is no vacancy. Rishi is the man who's going to lead us into the election. OK, and then after that? Oh, well, you know, I hope that we win, so then there'll be no vacancy. But there you are, Patrick. I'm dodging your question now, aren't I?
You know what? Well, I think not really, to be honest. I think people can tell exactly what you mean by that. But, Rana, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Much appreciated. Thank you for coming in. And we'll have to wait and see, won't we, for these by-election results. That was former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena, MP. Thank you very much. OK, now, coming up, Netflix, King Charles and the Home Office bus driver. They're all up for gongs in tonight's Greatest Britain and the Union Jackass. Find out why they are nominated and if one of them will take home one of tonight's crowns. That's later tonight. But coming up in Uncancelled, well, is there any truth to the rumours that Prince Harry is defying his wife Meghan and plotting a sensational homecoming by house hunting in the UK? Surely not. Our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, reveal all. That's next.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio. Time now for our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. So, rumours are swirling that the runaway royals, Harry and Meghan, may have divided on where their future lies. Speaking to Heat magazine, an insider source claimed that Harry has plans to relocate to New York, saying the truth is he desperately misses London. And being in the city helps. Plus, he could easily go home for a long weekend if they lived in New York. Meghan's so happy to be back in California that she can't imagine leaving. It would make zero sense to move, and she's frustrated Harry won't let this go. I mean, good grief. Harry has only lost his entire family, his reputation, the love of the British people, and moved country for her But, hey, you know, if he can't let it go, what an idiot. But Harry's ideal move could be a sensational return to the UK. With a separate source briefing New Magazine, there is a divide between the couple on this issue. But they will soon start looking for a property of their own somewhere near London, and Harry is very much leading this. So I'm joined by the wonderful Lady C and Phil Dumpier. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Now, Lady C, I'll start with you. So with the couple's ideal futures seemingly lying in different continents, what's going to happen?
We should be so lucky. You know, anybody who believes all of this cap has got to have absolutely no brain at all. A few weeks ago, it was Malibu. A few months ago, it was somewhere else. They were going to be moving from Montecito. They keep on, a year or two ago, it was New York. They keep on saying where they're going to be. My understanding is, reading between the lines, that this is just another attempt of theirs to try to end up getting column inches. But I will say one thing, if they move to England, they won't be moving. Harry would be staying here sometimes because it suits him in terms of his status as a councillor of state and a possible regent should anything happen to William in the future. But, you know, I think it's all a load of rubbish, quite frankly.
OK, Phil, look, what's your take on this then? Do you really think that, you know, Meghan surely should be more understanding of Harry? He's given up his life here, he's given up his friendships, he's given up his family, he's given up his reputation, his public popularity, and he just can't let it go now. He can't let it go that he wants to, you know, come and live back in London. Surely she's got to give him something, no?
Yeah, if you want to live in London, you go to New York. Yeah, good evening, Patrick. I don't know. I didn't realise that these stories originated in the supermarkets, the magazines, and God bless them. I mean, I think there's someone there got a bit of a deep imagination. I can imagine some morning myself, what on earth have I done? His family, they're all friends, fishing with the military, sorts of titles and all sorts of kudos. So I can imagine that sometimes he might have regrets, but I think that she very much rules the roost. I think she wants to remain in California, and I think he will do what she tells him, to be honest. So I do take this with...
Yeah, look, Lady C, you know, what kind of impact do you think that this is likely to have on their relationship going forward? As we understand it, they've both taken a private jet, naturally, as any good eco-warrior would, to a private island where billionaires go to escape millionaires because they are so in touch with the ordinary people. So that's where they are now, we believe. But what could it do to their relationship, do you think? If Harry's desperate to come back to the UK and she's desperate to never leave California, apart from to go to an island where billionaires escape millionaires?
Well, I suspect that Harry knows his place, and it's very much head under Meghan's heel. So I think that she rules that roost. So I've been told by people who know them very well. And, you know, he agitates occasionally, and she gives him a little bit of head occasionally so that he can do whatever he wants, and then she reels him back in. I think it's a very interesting relationship, to put it that way. You know, I think there's a tremendous amount of power play going on and a lot of domination and submissiveness. But I don't think he's not a very happy person. My understanding is the relationship is extremely volatile, and that, you know, she would depart tomorrow if she could find a suitable billionaire to depart with. The problem is, no billionaire wants a 40-something-year-old hag.
Oh, Lady C, that is scathing. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sure, Phil, I mean, you know, surely there would be men queuing up to look after Meghan Markle.
I'm sure she could find somebody, sorry. But in terms of coming back to the UK, I think what we might see is more of Harry coming back on his own, actually. I mean, they've not got a home over here anymore. I think rather like the Well Child Awards and the Invictus Games, I think if he's got an excuse to come back, he might well come back on his own. But I don't think she wants to come back to this country at all. No. And it wouldn't surprise me if she never comes back. I think she, as I've said many times, I think she realises how important she is. And it's just, she just doesn't really want to come here.
Lady C, I tell you what, if you were waiting for her at the airport, who could blame her? But we're going to talk about King Charles now, OK? So he's made a well-received State of the Nation speech at Mansion House last night, where he seemed to take a thinly veiled dig at the cancel culture eroding debate across Britain. Let's have a look and a listen.
The temptation to turn ourselves into a shouting or recriminating society must be resisted, or at least heavily mitigated whenever possible, especially in the digital sphere, where civilized debate too often gives way to rancor and acrimony. Next, there is the breathing space we afford one another, leaving us able to think and speak freely. This well carries the politeness and respect we owe to one another.
Lady C, do you think King Charles has covered himself in glory there? Would his mother be proud?
Absolutely. I think I'm very encouraged by that speech. I think that he has shown the best of himself and that he's following in his mother's very measured, sensible footsteps, where he says just enough and says everything at the same time without causing problems for himself or anybody else. And it's about time that he stepped up to the plate where cancel culture is concerned, because it is a huge concern, not only in this country, but in the United States of America. And I'm delighted that and also let's remember, his son Harry is a big part of cancel culture as a result of his position on the Aspen Institute. So I'm delighted that the king has finally actually taken the wind out of Harry's sails and in this regard.
OK. Phil, do you think then that King Charles's comments there were absolutely spot on? I was worried for him because we saw earlier on, didn't we, things like Ngozi Fulani with the sister space stuff and an apology, and we've seen him trying to appease a little bit, and I thought, oh, you're going to end up the wrong side of this cancel culture. Cancel culture is something that I think the monarchy really needs to watch out for in this society that we live in now. So him coming out against it, a bit of backbone from the king.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget he was encouraged to challenge things when he was growing up. Prince Philip's almost default position was to disagree with people straight away. So he talked about people being passionate but not pugnacious. And I think that he's done a very good thing with this speech. I think it's his best speech to date as king, actually. I agree with Lady C. It's encouraging people to have a debate but make it civilised. And he certainly had plenty of time to think about this speech. He's had a lot of time up in Scotland recently. I'm told he writes them himself with a little bit of assistance from aides. But he didn't get into specifics. He didn't mention things like the Middle East. He brought up artificial intelligence, social media, all sorts of things. But he put out the questions to the public, and he sort of, I think it's a very uniting speech.
I thought it was good. I think it's one of those speeches where you know what he means without him actually saying it. Again, I thought that was very, very good. Thank you very much, both of you. Can I just say, I really love this combo, right? It's like Lady C's the gin, right, and Phil's the tonic. You love it, OK? So it's Lady Colin Campbell there and Phil Dampier. Great stuff. You take care. Now it's time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. With me to reveal theirs is my panel. Alison, I'll start with you. So we're going Greatest Britain first, aren't we? So take it away.
It has to be the driver of the bus that kept on going, pushing the Just Stop Oil numpties, nudging them along, preventing them from stopping the asylum seekers, finally being delivered to the Bibby Stockholm barge. Well done, sir, whoever you are.
I think it was incredibly brave of him to do that, to be honest, because he was getting shouted at. Getting shouted at loads. Anyway, Sean, go on.
My greatest Britain is King Charles, whose very pertinent speech asking us to rise above the rancour and come together, and also taking a swipe at cancel culture, saying we must be able to listen to opposing views with politeness and courtesy. I just hope our great nation listens to him.
OK, Amy.
I think you should listen to him, actually.
You need to listen even more.
Come on.
Mine is Uber Butler. He's an amazing presenter. He's got a documentary out called The Great Amazon Heist, where he exposes working conditions in a special way only he could, which includes marketing driver's urine and making it a bestseller.
You know what? Can I say, actually, I like this guy. He's turned... didn't he turn his back garden into, like, London's highest-rated restaurant?
Loads of things.
He's done loads of stuff.
An exquisite back catalogue, and I'm actually in one of his videos, so...
Oh, yeah. Well, see, so he's got great taste. Right, OK. The greatest Britain tonight has to be... the coach driver, yes, the Just Stop Oil bus driver. Oh, come on. He absolutely is. What a hero, what a legend, yeah. So there we go. And I believe, as it currently stands, that no Just Stop Oil members were harmed in the making of that epic video. Right, OK, Union Jackass time. I'll start with you again, Alison. Go on.
It's going to be Sky News' presenter Anna Botting, who conducted an incredibly hostile, hysterical and embarrassing interview with Mark Regev, a very, very calm, nicely spoken Israeli government advisor. I thought Anna Botting summed up what we find too much in the media, parroting the anti-Israeli line. Absolutely shocking journalism.
I believe that we can see a bit of this.
Good evening to you. Was it you?
Apparently not.
It's not just the party line, is it? I've stood at the border myself. I've seen your airstrikes on apartment buildings. You have the capability to cause utter devastation to the people of Gaza City. That's what's happened tonight. The real fact of it is, whatever is the cause of this, it might be too late. The touch paper has already been lit. Do you understand that?
Gosh, a news presenter having an opinion. Can't go around having things like that, can we? Sean, your Union Jackass.
My Union Jackass is Netflix, who've pumped the price again to $17.99. Yes, $17.99 for full subscription, which is a bit rich when it's filled with lots of low-budget filler content.
OK, very quickly, Amy, go on.
It's Conservative candidate Andy Cooper following his rather crude assessment via a pretty vile flowchart of parents living in poverty, and his subsequent sorry, not sorry explanation. Go have a look.
OK, right, the winner is Netflix. Not quite for the reason that Sean gave, because I think it's starting to make the TV licence fee for the BBC looking like good value for money, and we can't have that, can we? So there we go. All of you, look, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. Thank you very much to everybody who's been watching and listening as well. I will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Take it easy. Headliners next. Mwah.
Hello, very good evening. I'm Alex Burkle, and here's your latest GB News weather update. Storm Babette is going to bring a lot of rain and some very windy weather across many parts, particularly the northeast, through the next 24 hours. We are sandwiched between a blocking high towards the northeast of us and low pressure towards the southwest, but because of that high, this frontal system in the north isn't going anywhere particularly fast. That's why the rainfall totals are going to continue to build up across eastern Scotland in particular as we go through the next day or so. Very high rainfall totals could be in excess of 200 millimetres for some parts. It is going to be a mild night with lots of wet and windy weather around, temperatures not dropping much, and gusts of winds coming in from the east of around 60-70 miles per hour for some eastern coastal parts. Friday then is going to be a wet picture for many of us. Heavy rain across Northern Ireland into Northern England, and rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, which is why some severe disruption is quite likely. Towards the southwest though, a dry picture with a scattering of showers, and here temperatures a few degrees above average for the time of year. Elsewhere feeling cooler with the wind and the rain. It is going to be another wet day for many eastern northeastern areas on Saturday. The rain not quite as heavy as we go through Friday, but likely to cause some further issues because of the heavy rain that it's coming on the back of. Otherwise, it's a drier picture for many parts of England and Wales with a scattering of showers. Sunday looks like a quieter day with more showers possible by next week.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour, Sunday the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
t-shirt. It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hi there, good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's urged Saudi Arabia to use its influence to achieve stability in the Middle East. The Prime Minister and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have agreed to work together to avoid further escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. It was during a meeting in Riyadh. The Prime Minister will meet other Arab leaders as part of a 2-day trip to capitals in the region. In Jerusalem earlier, the Prime Minister vowed to stand in solidarity with Israel in a meeting with his counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli leader thanked Rishi Sunak, calling his visit a strong statement of support in time of darkness. Rishi Sunak, though, stressed Israel must adhere to international law in Gaza and that the conflict must not spread elsewhere.
good, productive conversations with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli President Herzog. Among other things, we discussed the importance of this conflict not escalating regionally and the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza to help people who need it. I also had the opportunity to meet families of British nationals who have been taken hostage. We're doing absolutely everything we can to get them home.
9 Britons are now known to have died in the Hamas attacks earlier this month, with 7 still missing. Meanwhile, Israel continues to strike what it calls Hamas targets in Gaza. Palestinian authorities say more than 3,700 people have died in the enclave and some 12,000 people have been injured. Israel's defence minister has told troops they'll soon see Gaza from the inside ahead of the expected ground offensive. The international charity Action Against Hunger says the lack of food and water in Gaza is leading to a health crisis on the brink of explosion. However, Egypt's state media is reporting that the Rafah crossing is set to open for a few hours tomorrow to allow aid into Gaza. The US President Joe Biden announced yesterday he'd secured a deal with Egypt to allow in 20 lorries carrying humanitarian aid. Many more are queuing at the border. The UN says 100 lorries of aid are needed per day to address the deepening crisis. Asylum seekers have returned to the Bibi Stockholm in Portland, despite activists attempting to prevent it from happening. Just Stop Oil protesters obstructed a coach carrying migrants holding banners reading "No prison chips" and "Demand humanity." All 39 people were removed from the barge in August after Legionella bacteria was discovered. A 57-year-old woman's died after being swept into a river in Angus in Scotland as Storm Babette batters the country. The red weather warning means there's a risk to life, with extensive flooding and winds stronger than 70 miles an hour forecast. More than 400 homes have been asked to evacuate in Brechin. Thousands more have been left without power and are facing unprecedented amounts of rain. And meanwhile, 4 flood warnings have been issued for parts of northern England and the Midlands, with the storm set to sweep southwards on Friday. This is GB News. That's it for the moment. Now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Josh Howie, and joining me tonight to help make sense of Friday's newspapers are Steve N. Allen, who's just released an impressive song about the Marvel films on Twitter, and Nick Dixon, whom I believe you said you were thinking about starting a podcast or something.
Got 2 very popular podcasts.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah.
Great, man.
The Weekly Skeptic and The Current Thing, available now.
OK, well, there we go. Thank you so much.
No, you asked and I answered.
It's a joke. I should explain that Nick and I get taxi home every night and we talk about your podcast. Quite extensive.
We don't. You sit in silence checking who hates you on Twitter.
That's true. Well, tonight will be a fun journey home. Right, let's take a quick look at Friday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail. There is no forgiveness for this thing, only total annihilation of Hamas. You will soon see Gaza from the inside. Telegraph, get ready to see Gaza from the inside. Guardian, warning that relief convoy for Gaza, too little, too late. The Times, do a bit to ease Israel crisis, Sunak earns Saudis, urges, and Mirror, reckless and callous. And finally, the Daily Star, freeze, and those were your front pages. And we are going to begin with the Daily Mail, Steve.
Yep, their front page has the headline, there is no forgiveness for this thing, only a total annihilation of Hamas. You will soon see Gaza from the inside. This is the dramatic address, as they call it on the front page, by Israel's defence minister. There's, before the internet goes crazy, if you look at this, only total annihilation of Hamas, this is saying get rid of the terrorist capacity, the tunnels, the terrorists. That's before you kick off the internet, because I know what the internet's like. This is not saying attack all of Palestine, getting rid of all of...
Genocide and all of the other big words.
And so that's actually quite balanced when you think what this is. This is a speech like on the eve of battle, not known for being the home of nuance. These are meant to be stirring addresses rather than let's take this whole wider picture and debate it. Which I think is interesting to add into it.
So it's not like Churchill was like, we're going to get the top Nazi echelon and leave the German citizens alone and whatnot.
Yeah.
Didn't necessarily make that distinction at the time.
And it's an interesting distinction to have. And it's good that it's there, because you know what the internet's like. But people seem to mix up the category that they're talking about. Instead of just talking about Hamas, about terrorists, to think that you're talking about a larger group of people, that's often where the argument falls into problems. So it's always worth bringing that back to that.
Well, if the internet wanted to be pedantic, they could say there's the Hamas government and the militant branch. There's the political branch and the militant branch. But obviously they mean the militant branch. But yeah.
They're all the same.
Well, yeah,
it's a phrase the internet uses quite a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, they are the same. Yeah,
right,
they're literally the same.
From the Palestine side, there was someone on GB pointing that out the other day. They would say that. So I'm just suppose I'm here giving balance, but which is a weird.
Do we have to have balance on this particular?
Not on Hamas, you know. I got in trouble for it the other day. I said, why do we want anyone in the country with a Hamas flag? And I was told I was some sort of, taking sides for that. It's like I don't think that's really taking sides. I'm against people that want to kill us all in the West. You know what I mean? And all Jewish people and anyone else. So
that's not against terrorists. Yeah. It seems like a position you shouldn't have to argue.
Yeah, it's not Palestinians or Palestinian flag. It's the Hamas flag specifically. I meant, but
no, I mean, but that is unfortunately where we're finding ourselves at, is that it's amazing that there is a position to take on this. You have terrorists who have just committed the most unbelievable barbarity, and I don't think. I mean, people obviously at home necessarily can't see the photo up close, but there's a determination there, because we can't really understand the scale of it in terms of the numbers. I tried to do the maths before. I'm not as good as you, Steve, but it's the equivalent. Having 1,400 people murdered in that way is about 25,000 in the UK. Having 200 people kidnapped, 2 of its citizens held, would be a couple of thousand here. There's no way that any sovereign country would allow these terrorists to hold their people, to not go in, to get them back. And that seems to be the thing that's missing from here, is this is part of